A leaked document has revealed details on how the authority charged with governing and rebuilding the Gaza Strip could operate and how it could be structured. The proposal suggests a few billionaires who could sit on the board and flags it would include an investment body tasked with generating real financial returns. The document is believed to have been generated by former British Prime Minister Tony Blair's think tank, the Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, prior to President Donald Trump announcing his 20-point peace plan for Gaza. Our reporter Nabil Al-Nashar joins us now with more details. So Nabil, what can you tell us about this leaked document?
Roz, it's about a 21-page document that goes into a considerable amount of detail about what this interim government imposed on Gaza could look like. The so-called Gaza International Transitional Authority, or GITA for short, would have a hierarchical structure led by an international board that exercises supreme strategic and political authority, according to the document, and a chairman who leads the entire operation as senior political executive. It would also include a body tasked with driving investment projects, including infrastructure and housing schemes. GITA would be led by a board comprised of 7 to 10 members, including leading international figures with executive and financial expertise. So you could see from the way it's written that there is a focus on business interests and capital interests. Examples that were given in the document include Egyptian billionaire Naguib Sawiris and American private equity billionaire Mark Rowan and others. At least one Palestinian representative would be on the board, according to this document, provided that they were qualified, although the document doesn't exactly go into details about what qualifies a qualification for a Palestinian to be on the board. The document also explains that the chairman would have a compact team made up of 25 personnel, and it would be set up to also include a specialized security force dedicated to safeguarding GITA's top leadership in Gaza. Now, underneath this governing body in the hierarchy of the structure, there would be 5 commissioners who would oversee 5 key areas: humanitarian, reconstruction, legal, legislative, and security oversight. Their jobs would be to provide a thematic supervision and coordination in the respective areas. Permeating all of this would be something they're calling the International Stabilization Force that liaises with Egyptian and Israeli security and would effectively rule the borders of Gaza. Its mandate would include deterring armed group resistance, as well as protecting humanitarian and reconstruction operations. It would also be responsible for counterterrorism and what the document describes as high-risk threat response. Now, according to all of this, there is also a budget included in the document. GITA would cost nearly $388 million US dollars, that's nearly 600 million in Australian dollars, to run in its first 3 years. More than $27 million in Australian would be budgeted for the board alone. So this is just a little bit of the broad strokes of what's included in this document, Roz.
It should come as no surprise then that no Palestinian leader, including myself, and no Palestinian leader that I am aware of, was consulted on the Trump 20-point plan. In that sense, the great lesson of the Abraham Accords was not learnt, and that was that you cannot have peace with the Palestinians without the Palestinians at the table.
So, Nabil, what does this mean for Palestinians in Gaza?
So what this means for Palestinians is they come at the very bottom of the flowchart. And when I say flowchart, I mean there is an actual organizational flowchart showing the relationship between all these governing bodies. And at the very bottom, you see something called the Palestinian Executive Authority. And its job would be basically to implement the policies that are being legislated and decided by the higher-ups on this international governing body. It means that there would be very little to no control over what happens on their land. And leading this executive Palestinian authority would be a CEO appointed by the international board. And that executive authority would be responsible to rebuild Gaza entirely. That means an entirely new healthcare system, new hospitals, clinics, an entirely new educational system, all forms of traditional government, including a judiciary, including a Gaza civil police force, which would answer to the ISF we mentioned earlier. The person you heard speaking earlier is John Naeem Snowbar, who's a former Australian diplomat that I spoke with about this document. He's also a Palestinian Christian, and as you heard him say, he says it's not surprised that Palestinians are not being prioritized in this case. He's also not entirely against everything in this document. Mr. Snowbar believes that investments in Gaza are ultimately a good thing, especially after the entire strip has been decimated the way it has been. But he seriously questions who will be looking out for Palestinian interests while there are others clearly looking after capital and business interests.
The question, though, is where and who is looking out for Palestinian interests in that scenario. I think when it comes to the region generally, no doubt the region would be better served by trade. No doubt the region would be better served by investment. No doubt, we're to welcome the Australia UAE free trade agreement that was signed even recently. All of those are positive things. The question really here is whether the Palestinian people have a right to a share in their own property, have a right to a share in their own future, have a right to a share in their own sovereignty.
So how similar is this proposal, Nabil, to President Donald Trump's 20-point plan?
It's somewhat similar. There are strong similarities, Roz, between the two. For example, the proposal's description of this ISF, the International Stabilization Force, aligns very closely with the same force that Donald Trump describes in his 20-point plan. And it's described under the same name. He also calls it the ISF. So it's suggested that this document, at least in part, maybe informed Donald Trump's 20-point plan. And here's what Mr. Snowbar thinks about that.
I mean, it's clearly stated by President Trump that Tony Blair will be involved. And so I have no doubt that there is a relationship there between the document that establishes GITA, which notes Palestinians right at the end of a process as opposed to the beginning of a process. I have no doubt that Tony Blair is involved and his organization is involved in this project. I think worryingly, what it shows is the lens through which Palestine is being seen.
So the lens through which Palestine is being seen might not be put front and center, I believe is the end of that quote. What we're looking at here is a document that had different iterations. We know from Tony Blair's think tank, Institute for Global Change, is that it was something that existed at one point of time. Whether this will come to fruition as the final official document on what the governing body in Gaza would look like or not is yet to be seen.